we believe we can put in a little extra effort. We will also understand a little bit about how you can do effective root cause analysis and what a smart CAPA means. And towards the end of the session, we'll also do a quick question and answer round, just so that we can clarify any details. So moving on, how does it look today? Because we're all trying a virtual setup, right? And this is not easy. So thank you so much for joining again. But given, the COVID situation worldwide, the best possibility for us is to present virtually, and we will try our very best to make it a very smooth session for all of you today. If you see at the bottom of your screen, there is a question and answer tab where you can type in your questions and suggestions. We have a panelist today, Julie, Anna, and Munmun. For any question you type, you will be hearing an answer from our side. As you may have noticed, everybody's automatically on mute. So we encourage you to stay on mute and to use the question and answer tab that you see at the bottom of your screen. To make this active participation and to make it fun for you, we've inculcated a quiz and a poll section so we can enjoy ourselves as we go ahead with the training today. We definitely, once again, encourage you to ask any questions in the Q&A tab, because that way we can provide as much clarity as needed. So moving on, let's see what this looks like. So this is just to give you a rough understanding and an introduction of what it looks like for a region, right? You are already aware that Target is committed to responsible business conduct. We respect human rights, and for environmental stewardship as well. We understand that these are fundamental principles for our business practices and standards. We expect our business partners, our suppliers, to share those principles and to uphold our standards. Suppliers must conduct their business with a high level of integrity and maintain transparent and accurate records. And I wanted to stress that once again. We expect our vendors and business partners to continue to partner with the factory to sustain compliance, because that's where it starts. It is necessary that the factory demonstrates compliance with Target standards of vendor engagement, which is what we call SOVE. If there are no issues, or if there are few minor issues identified, it's okay. You can go towards an acceptable and an outstanding rating that you see here. But our concern is an auto fail, denied, inaccurate rating. These ratings do not demonstrate adequate compliance to our Target standard of vendor engagement, and we will be going into some of the issues that can lead to auto fail or auto fail exception here that you see on the screen. So as a business partner that produces product for Target, it is your responsibility to comply with local laws as well as with our standards. Target has overall 9 zero tolerance issues. They consist of forced labor, human trafficking, underage labor, discrimination, violence, bribery, unauthorized subcontracting and sandblasting textiles, illegal wastewater discharge, and invalid current permits. So we would request you to pay a little bit of focus on these issues. Our expectation is again that, through this training that you develop processes and procedures, understand what issues are critical, and work on sustaining compliance on an ongoing basis. So I'm going to move on now, and I'm going to invite my colleague Queenie here to take towards the next section. So Queenie, welcome.
Thank you, Magna. Thank you, Heather and Magna, for the great introduction. Hello, everyone. This is Queenie from Responsible Sourcing Team, and I'm based in Vietnam. It's my honor today to walk you through and let you understand better the critical issue list. As Magna and Heather shared earlier, we want to be transparent and would like our business partner to be clear on the critical issue list. At Target, responsible sourcing is the way that we do business. We want to ensure that we partner with the highest quality and most ethical vendors. We provided visibility to Target minimum requirements, which are the most aggregate issues that we consider auto fails. It is readily available on partner online as responsible sourcing critical issue list. So please ensure you use this list to ensure your every factory is meeting basic fundamental standards. Please ensure that minimum requirements are met prior to beginning target production, and that you prioritize efforts on the most urgent violations. A factory will receive an out-of-fail rating if one or more critical issue is identified, which will result in factory is not approved for production, factory is deactivated for non-compliance for at least 6 months, and purchase orders are impacted. Therefore, vendors are required to know and understand the critical issue list, validate your factories are compliant prior to factory registration and authorization in VMM. Review the most recent factory audit to identify any facilities that may have critical issue violations. Last but not least, partner with your factory to understand the root cause, develop an active remediation plan to correct the issues, and validate sustained compliance. So now let's have a look at a few of these critical issues that are highlighted here for us. Among all of the critical issues publicized on Partner Online, I would like to introduce our business partner, the group of critical issue callouts related to emergency asset. Please ensure adequate, unlocked, unobstructed, clearly marked emergency assets for dormitories and workplace. So let's specifically look at the issues now. The first issue callout related to emergency asset is Issue 9B, inadequate number of emergency assets in the factory. The requirements are the factory will either have a minimum of 2 emergency assets on each floor or will follow local law requirements. The assets cannot be power operated, for example, electric doors, and will comply with all local law requirements. The second issue call out related to emergency asset is issue 9I, inadequate number of emergency assets in the dormitory. The requirements are the factory should ensure adequate number of emergency assets in the dormitory per local law. And if the local law does not specify the number of assets, the number of assets should meet at least 2 assets as per target expectation. And the last issue call out related to emergency assets are issue 9L. Emergency assets are locked. The requirements are emergency assets must remain unlocked during operational hours to allow employees to exit the building during an emergency. And if there are serious security concerns in an area, locks, ideally a push bar, will be installed or emergency exit doors that will prevent intruders or invaders from entering, but will not prevent employees from leaving the buildings. These 3 critical issues related to emergency exit are considered as out-of-fail or critical issue as per target SOVE. So please ensure that you refer these guidelines readily available on Partner Online under applying SOVE to make sure that your factory complies with those. Just now, I shared the 3 critical issues related to emergency assets. So now I would like to share with you that some examples of common non-compliance at the factory and some best practice for your reference. The requirements related to emergency asset is please ensure adequate, unlocked, unobstructed, and clearly marked emergency assets from dormitory and workplace. On the left-hand side shows us the good practice such as ensure the emergency exit are kept unlocked. On the picture, you see that the door push or slide open in accordance with local law to provide quick and easy escape during an emergency. And also on the left-hand side picture, you see that all exit route aisles and doors should be clearly marked, illuminated, with adequate lights, maintained with adequate width, and cleared from any form of obstructions. Also, on the left-hand side of picture, you see that each emergency exit should discharge away from the structure and not re-enter the structure. And from the right-hand side, you see that it is the violation where the emergency exit is locked during operational hours. So this is considered as out-of-fail critical issues. The second critical issue call-out I would like to share is related to fire detection or emergency alarm system. The requirements here is the factory needs to install functional fire alarm system with battery backup, which cover entire area to alert all of the employees during emergencies. For certain regions, it is mandatory to have centralized alarm control system with interconnections. It is also a basic requirement to install visual fire alarm for high noise area or production functions. If the factory lack of any of these requirements, issue 12G, no functioning fire alarm or emergency alarm system will be called out as critical issues and will impact as out-of-fail rating. Next critical issue call-out is related to fire extinguisher, hoses, and or hydrants. The requirements here is the functional and accessible fire extinguisher, hose, and or hydrant should be installed as guided by local law. A proper operating instructions also should be available with each installation location. If the factory lack of a functional and accessible fire protection system will lead to a factory out-of-fail rating. Next slide, please. The next critical issue call-out is related to fire license. The requirement here is the factory should maintain mandatory and required license and permit, and this is a key requirement for target. Fire permit or no objection certificate requirement may vary per country requirement. The license or certificate should be updated and matched with the current building structure and use. The recommendation advised by the fire department must be implemented and completed with as specified time intervals. If the factory or any facility is found with no or mandatory fire license, we will call out the issue 92I fire license, and this will cause the factory out-of-fail rating. The next issue call-out is related to license and permitting. Again, is approved building plan. The requirement is the factory shall apply and obtain approved building plan from the concerned building authority prior to start the factory or dormitory building construction, or for any alteration or modification after the original building approval. The building plan should be updated and should reflect current building structure and use. If the factory fails to do so, it will lead to the out-of-fail rating with critical issue call-out 32S, approved building plan. Next issue call-out related to license and permitting is building safety, or you call it stability certificate or permits. The name may vary per country. For example, some countries call as occupation certificate or building acceptance permit, or stability certificate or factory license, etc. However, the general requirement is that the factory must comply to obtain a building safety or stability certificate or permit from building authority or department to certify that the building construction prior to factory operation or factory production, and the license or certificate should be updated and matched with the current building structure and use. If the factory does not have this license or acceptance certificate or factory license, this will lead to the critical issue call out, and the factory will have the auto fail rating. The next issue call out related to license and permitting is current and valid environmental permits and license. Mandatory license is thus required by environmental department as instructed by local law is critical for target. Therefore, the factory shall obtain required environmental permits and license such as environmental impact assessment, environmental impact assessment approval, environmental acceptance report, and wastewater discharge permit, which are related to water use, energy use, and pollutant emission or discharge for current operations. The factory shall plan and provide adequate time to update the current environmental approvals and permit for any alteration that may change the environmental impact of factory operations. The license name and the requirement here may vary per country and region, but if the factory is absent of any mandatory license or certificate, it will lead to the factory auto fail rating with issue critical issue call out. The next group of critical issue call out I would like to share is related to working hours and wage. Talking about the working hours, here you can see that there are 3 critical issues related to working hours that Target would like to share with our business partners. On the first issue, left-hand side, you see that first critical issue is about the overtime. As you may aware that any work beyond 60 hours per week is a violation of local law as well as the International Labour Organization Convention. However, to create a path of sustainable remediation progress in this aspect, we have identified a few issues as critical in the area of working hours. On the left-hand side issue, the first issue, 19C. The requirements here is that all overtime hours should be performed voluntarily by workers, which means workers should have the right to decline any overtime at any certain moment. Otherwise, it will generate the issue 19C, which will lead to the auto fail rating. At the middle, you see that another requirement related to working hours is about the one-day rest. If workers are not given a day off after 13 consecutive days of work,
Recording in progress.
This will impact the audit rating, criticality, and lead to the auto fail rating. However, any workers not getting off after 7 days of consecutive work will generate the issue. However, this is the no impact of auto fail rating as of now. And on the right-hand side, the last issue related to working hours that we call out as the critical issue is related to the working hours exceeds 80 hours. If any single workers found working 80 hours or more in a week, will create the issue call out 19O, and this is considered as critical issue with auto fail rating. The next group of critical issue call out related to wages include 2 issues. The first one on the left-hand side Issue 20B, wages must be paid at least at legal minimum wages. Target expect employees are paid proper wages that meet or exceed the minimum wages per local law for all hours worked. In addition to minimum wages, employees are also required to pay time off wages such as annual leave, holiday wages as required by local law. Otherwise, the factory will have the issue 20B call out that will lead to the out-of-fail rating. And on the right-hand side, the issue related to the wage related to the accurate time recording system. The factory must have a functional timekeeping system to record accurate working hours. The timekeeping system can be electronic, for example, scan card, hand card, finger scan, or face scan, or mechanical type, such as punch time clock, or manual attendance sheets. But the manual attendance sheets must have the exact time in and time out with employees' acknowledgement. If the factory failed to do so, the critical issue will be called out and it will impact the audit rating, which is the out-of-fail rating. The next group of critical issue call-out is related to employee deposit and employment fee. So what does this mean? In Target, we do not support the practice of factories or third parties, including recruitment agency or labor agents, requiring an employee to pay a deposit or other fee in order to begin employment, regardless of local law requirement. And the deposit or excessive fee that the employee must work to pay off prevent the employee from freely quitting or resulting in forced or bonded labor. The recruitment agency or labor agent or broker fees will therefore be paid by the factory and shall not be deducted from the worker wages. Target requires all of our business partners to follow the employer pays recruitment model, then employee pay model. Otherwise, the critical issue 26A, employee deposit and or fee paid for the employment issue will be called out, and that will cause the out-of-fail rating. There are some examples related to the recruitment fee that we would like to share with you. For example, job application or processing fee, fee to agent or sub-agent or intermediaries and employers. Documentation and permit fees like passport, visa, work permit, etc. Pre-departure fee like skill set, medical exam or screening, training or orientation. Arrival or orientation fee for new hire training or medical exam or screening. Last but not least, the fee may include transportation and lodging fee for the transportation from workers' home country to receiving country workplace. Border crossing fee, return transportation to workers' home country. The next group of critical issue call-out is related to transparency and unimpeded access. Here you can see that there are a list of critical issue call-out related to this category. In general, Target expects the factory management to allow Target assessor and or authorized third party to conduct employee interview, management interview, and make time record and payroll are available for review at all times. Target expects the factory shall be transparent and maintain only one set of payroll and time records, which are an accurate reflection of all overtime and regular hours worked. and wages shall be paid to the employees. Time records here should include all types of formal and informal records that are related to working hours. For example, leave application form, overtime application form, early leave slip, etc. Payroll record include all types of formal and informal records that are related to wage and benefit. For example, social insurance, monetary deduction record, individual online piece rate record, maternity leave pay record, and pay slip. If the business partner failed to comply with any of these requirements, respective critical issue will be called out and it will cause the out-of-fail rating. Next slide, please. The next critical issue call out related to freedom of association. Trade union or worker association may exist at a factory. The employees will be able to freely affiliate with a trade union or other worker association without retaliation. Therefore, no employee should feel discriminated against, harassed, or penalized because of their affiliation with a trade union or other worker association by the factory managers. A trade union or worker association is an association of workers created to protect and advance the interests of its member in the workplace, often through collective bargaining. Workers will have the right to form a trade union or worker association for the purpose of regulating the relation between employees and employers. Trade union representative status is legally protected under the ILO Convention 87 and 98 against the union-based discrimination. If the factory failed to comply with this, which means the workers are not free to affiliate with a trade union or other worker association without retaliation, the factory will face with the critical issue call out and will cause the out-of-fail rating. The next issue, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Previous slide. Yeah, thank you. The next critical issue sharing is related to no underage labor and no harassment. The factory shall maintain the age verification documents for all employees, including regular, seasonal, migrant, temporary, contracted, new hires, piece rate workers, and adolescent workers in their personal file created by the worker start date. If the age verification documents are missed for any employees, this stands for inadequate recruitment process and high risk of underage labor that will lead to the out-of-fail rating. And Target expect that all employees to be treated with respect and are not threatened or insulated. The manager shall not verbally mistreat the employees by shouting or yelling. If the factory failed to comply with the legal age verification documents or verbally mistreated the employees, the factory will face the critical issue call out and will cause the out-of-fail rating. The last critical issue that I would share is that related to the water stewardship. The critical issue call out here is the bioprocessing wastewater management. The effluent treatment plant is the on-site treatment facility that is used to treat, per local regulation, the wastewater generated at a factory prior to discharge into the environment or into an off-site third-party treatment plant. The factory shall install and maintain appropriate process wastewater treatment system that reduce the pollutant contribution of its facilities to levels which are compliant to applicable laws and regulations. So factory must ensure to install the functioning wastewater management system, and the wastewater is not bypassing or leaking from the effluent treatment plant and discharged into the surrounding environment or municipal system illegally. That is an overview of all critical issues that Target would like to share with our business partner. And show here on the slide are the responsible sourcing audit rating scoring framework, along with the defined action and audit cadence. From this framework, you see that we incorporated a numerical score, which will allow you to evaluate performance in a more systematic way and incentivize continuous improvement. The factories do not have 3 chances to meet an acceptable or outstanding rating. Each factory starts with a score of 100, and points are deducted for each issue identified. At the top, you see that outstanding demonstrate compliance with no and for very few issues, and the score is from 91 to 100. Second, acceptable rating with a score of 71 to 90. Both ratings, outstanding and acceptable, will approve the factory for productions, and the audit cadence is 12 months. Third, about the needs improvement rating. If the factory receives a needs improvement result, you will need to provide a follow-up audit in 6 months that reflects significant improvement. About out-of-fail. If the out-of-fail rating is issued when one or more aggregate issue, critical issue that I already shared earlier are identified. If target is denied access to the factory, if you do not submit an audit and or HICS FEM self-assessment within the timeline provided to you, or you fail to meet the improvement threshold listed, the out-of-fail rating will be occurred and will result in a 6-month factory deactivation. The last rating is about the zero tolerance. If the zero tolerance issue is found, it will result in a factory deactivation for 3 years. That is an overview of critical issue list and responsible sourcing audit result. Thank you for your attention. Before we jump into the next section about the factory deactivation and the common top frequent issue the factory are facing for the last quarters, I would like to launch a small quiz to test your knowledge, also as well as to refresh what I have shared just now. So please write your attention on the screen. I will launch a pop quiz now, and please answer those questions. Right, on the screen, you see that the first question, what are the requirements for a fire alarm system? And it is a multiple choice question, so please select the correct answer. This is a multiple choice question. Can you please select your answer as well, please? Right, for the first questions, the correct answer is requirements of a fire alarm system is centralized automatic, backup battery for fire alarm, audible in all areas, centralized automatic fire detector. The second question, what are the requirements for emergency exit? The correct answer is unlocked, unblocked passage during operational hours should be illuminated. Number of exits should be as per local law, and electric door is not the correct option. The third question, which of the following requirements are for fire extinguishers? The correct answer you can choose is the properly charged, easily accessible, marked, and monitor often. The second last question is about the overtime. Select the correct answer for overtime. I can see the high percentage of completion here, and the correct answer related to overtime is voluntary. Overtime wage should be paid by local law. The next question is related to the day off after consecutive hours. After 6 consecutive hours, the employee should receive a day off. And the last question related to target requirement of transparency and unimpeded access. The correct answer are access to employee interview, allowed to conduct management interview, payroll and time record available for auditing. Time record are available for review. And last one is single set of actual payroll and time record. Thank you for participating into the pop quiz, and it's great that I see majority of the correct answer here. Although we are facing the technical issue from the Zoom, so sorry for that. And I hope that this small pop quiz will help you to refresh the knowledge. Thank you. And now I would like to pass to my colleague, Magna, to share with you about a factory deactivation. Over to you, Magna.
Thank you so much for that session, Queenie. I think Queenie covered all of the critical issues, that can lead to the auto-fail rating. And I think she also went through the audit results. So I hope you had a good chance to understand those. Sorry about the technical difficulty that you just had with the poll section. I think it's a technical difficulty on our end for the Zoom poll section. So apologies for that. We will continue now for factory deactivation, right? As you see here, and you see that there are 2 columns here, but just to give you an overall understanding, in most cases, Target will not accept merchandise from a 3-year deactivated factory. And RS will determine all exceptions if in any case there are to be any. So if you see here, a 3 zero tolerance violation at any of the enterprise level, which means that's not only limited to responsible sourcing, but also covers our PSQA and global trade team. And if there is any violation from RS, PSQA or global trade within 3 years, it will lead in vendor deactivation, as you see here under zero tolerance. If you move towards auto fail, and if you pay some attention here, if the factory is an existing factory today and is working with us, they will have 6 months to take actions and to get, to get improved to a needs improvement rating. If they cannot meet this expectation, then it will result in a 6-month deactivation. And Target will not accept merchandise from deactivated facilities. And also, just to make it clear, in most cases, Target will not accept merchandise from deactivated facilities. And as you see here, and what I mentioned earlier, in case there is to be an exception, that is going to be decided by Target. So therefore, please pay attention to your critical issues that Queenie just covered. Also, just a point here that you see here at the bottom of your screen, all OBS and D directors, merchandisers and buyers are contacted when a factory is deactivated. So just want you to pay a little bit of attention here. Moving on to the next slide, and this is more about how can we as Target help prevent issues. And what you see here on this slide is more of an example of what decision making looks like if in case there is a failed audit due to double books. And double books is something in our experience we do come across, and just wanted to help you understand how critical it is and how you can manage it. So this is just an overall example, something that we see often occurring at factories. In case there is a late material approval, right? And what will happen in case there's a material approval at the factory? It's obviously going to go towards a delayed order confirmation. And automatically the production will not start on time. It's going to fall behind, and it's going to be behind the schedule that was originally decided, which will automatically lead to rush orders at the factory level, right? And that will lead to excessive overtime. You might want your workers to work extra. And then in order to create everything right, because so much has already happened, sometimes, our factories resort to double bookkeeping, which is not appreciated. But in case this issue, is found during an audit and there is an audit, then obviously it's going to lead automatically to an auto fail rating, and that will lead to deactivation. So if you see here, the first two columns, it's very important that you have a transparent dialogue with us. If there is a concern that you're seeing on Target's end, with regard to late material approval, or if you see that, we are coaxing you in for production, but it is getting a little difficult for you because of the rush orders, I really request you to reach out to your local responsible sourcing team and to let them know, and together, we can work out a situation. But unless and until you are not going to be transparent with us, there is no way to know what's going on, and double bookkeeping is not appreciated by us at all. So just wanted to be very clear on this slide, but this is how Target can help prevent issues. You need to reach out to us. You need to be transparent. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a pause for a bit, because I know that's been an overload of information, and just wanted to give you some time in case you had certain questions to critical issues. We have our panelists here, and they have answered majority of the questions that you would have seen. But there are a couple of questions that are open, and I'm going to do a quick answer live session before we move on to the frequent issue section. So this is just a 10-minute, question and answer round. Feel free to type in your questions. I'm going to read them, and I'm going to invite a panelist to answer them. Understand, if there is a stipulation in law, factory should pay for it, and in this situation, factory is paying just for it. I don't really understand what this question is regarding. If you could provide a little more help here, Jessica, that would be helpful, because it looks like an incomplete answer here. Moving on to the next one. This is more about what about recruitment fees applicant paid relating to cost of administrative and traveling within cities, provinces, or country. So would any of the panelists want to take this up? Munmun, Julie, Anna?
Hi, Magna. The question is about recruitment free, but I would like to understand more,
Sure.
you know, what it really means. Is that about migrant workers from country to another country, or what is mean for the question? Need to more clarify on that.
Yeah, I agree, Julie. I think the question in itself is a little incomplete right now. So if you could give us a little more clarity, is it between countries, cities, for workers, regarding what we could help? Answer that a little better for you. Moving on, please re-explain the impact of 3 zero tolerance issues in a year. Like I mentioned earlier, this could be at any enterprise level, which means not just related to responsible sourcing, but also if there's an issue called out from PSQA or global trade within 3 years for any zero tolerance issue, that will lead in vendor deactivation, sorry, in vendor deactivation. So just wanted to be clear about that. Whether having a standard about picking up employees for interview during audit time. I think your question is regarding what our expectations are for employees for interview during audit time. So yes, Target and the third parties hold a right to conduct interviews during the audit time. I think that's what your question is. If anybody else understood it better, Julie, would you like to answer that? I see you typing a question, an answer here.
Right now, is that a question about whether having a standard pick up employee for interview during the audit times?
I'm not very clear, but I saw you typing, so
Is that question you asked?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so because today we are set the multiple scheme report from Better Work, ADLCB, SMETA, IBR. There's at least 6 audit scheme that we accepted. So it may have the different protocol by scheme. So we recommend you to read out the scheme to understand their protocol.
Thank you so much for that, Julie. I think that makes it absolutely clear. There's another question: when worker applies for a job, he submits personal documents that include health checking report. Does the facility pay back him for the health checking fee? I believe I can answer this one. That depends on your internal policy, but have you requested the worker to get the health checkup done? And in case you have requested the worker to get the health checkup done, what is that health checkup for? Is it for, let's say, age-related purposes, or is it for something beyond that for a particular job? Then I think you might need to look into it depending on what exactly the need is. After this, there is another one for wastewater report. Will target team remind factory in advance the deadline? Julie, again, if you would want to answer that one.
Yeah, thank you. For the wastewater report, is it the factory responsibility and due diligence to check your permit license report internally and apply proper time? Target is unable to, check every factory and remind you about internal your permit and license. Please do so by your responsibility. Thanks.
Thank you, Julie. And we will be sharing this deck with you. As for the critical issue list, this is already available on POL. So I would request you to please go on to POL and pull out the list and have it for your ready reference. I think that is all. I see one last question here. So what if factory doesn't have a wastewater treatment in the factory? They just need to comply with the local environmental requirement, and besides, factory doesn't use water besides toilet, kitchen. There's no laundry, printing inside. So Munmun, I see you answering this question. Would you want to speak about it?
Thank you, Magna. Sure. I think it's simple as it is. Like if a factory is not generating any industry wastewater, which is from the production itself, then it is not the requirement for them to have the wastewater plan.
Thank you so much for that, Munmun. I think this is done. And will we be sharing this? Yes, we are going to be sharing this with you, post the session today with all the registered email IDs we have. So no worries there. I think this one has come back from Jessica. If factory requests working to do health check fee, but worker needs to pay it first, then factory will reimburse the worker in the first month. Does it consider as critical as worker needs to pay for health check fee first? I think it's more about how you're reimbursing and what process and procedures you have in place for reimbursement. That is what we're going to be looking at to ensure that worker has in fact been reimbursed for that fee that he had paid, and for what regard. I hope that clarifies your question, Jessica. I think that is all. We will answer more questions towards the end, but we're going to move on for the time being. All right, so moving on to the next slide, I'm going to actually invite my colleague Padmalata to take it forward, please.
Thank you so much, Meghna. Thank you so much, Meghna and Queenie, for taking us through with the critical issue list and the audit rating and the consequences of not being with the target requirement and expectations. Now let us go through with some of the top regional, South Asia and Southeast Asia frequent issues list and what is target expectation while meeting the requirements. Let me take you through with the list on the following slides. When you are on the screen, when you look at the screen, so we are going to take you through the top frequent issues of both the regions, that is South Asia and Southeast Asia. The employees do not have access to appropriate PPEs. It has the issue number 13A. Employees are required to use a certain PPEs while completing the hazardous task. Example, cutting gloves while cutting the fabric, earplug while operating the noisy machines. Therefore, the factory management has to ensure that they procure appropriate PPEs and provide all workers required PPEs as per safety norms. Procuring alone is not sufficient. Along with procurement, it is also necessary and important that workers are trained and educated to use the required PPEs at all time while working on the hazardous task. There are two pictures shown on this slide. On the left hand side, the operation was being done without a metal hand gloves. This is definitely a violation under target SOVE. And the picture on the right hand side showing the cutting operation is being done with a metal hand gloves while on the task. Moving on the next slide. Machinery doesn't have functioning safety features. It has the issue number 10Q. Machines not having safety guards may pose a risk to operators. So factory should ensure that safety guards are fixed in the machines. Example, pulley guard is fixed for moving parts of the machine and needle guards for the sieving machines. It would be a good idea to include this in your internal audit checkpoints, and training is also provided to all workers prevent any such slip. Here we can see two pictures on the slide. One which is on the left hand side without a pulley guard. That is absolutely a violation under target SOVE. On the right hand side, the machine is fixed with the pulley guard. This is showing the safety features of the machine. Next slide. Emergency exit, block exit routes are otherwise increase the risk of injury to employees. It has the issue ID number 9G. This is one of the most frequently found issues in our regular audits. Emergency exits must open from the inside so employees can easily escape in emergency. Doors shall open in a direction and manner that won't prevent workers from quickly and safely moving towards an evacuation routes. During any fire incidents, the clear exit routes are most critical and important to save lives at the time of evacuation. Factories should provide and ensure all routes are clear from obstruction at all time. It should support the safe evacuation of workers and do not increase the risk of injuries. And in the picture, we can see that exit is blocked with a cotton box, and also it has tied with a rope, which is obstructing employee for his easy evacuation. So you have to ensure exit are free from any such obstruction and avoid injuries at all time in the factory. Employees are not aware of the factory rules. It has the issue number 1A. We often see that employees are not aware of the factory rules because of multiple reasons, such as high iteration rate or insufficient training or training materials. Therefore, all factories should provide regular and refresher training on factory rules to all employees, including new employees just joined and also to the existing workers, to ensure employee understanding the training content, and also you should have a proper feedback process to understand the whether workers are aware and understand the training content that we are trained recently. As a best practice, the factory to retain a record or a logbook demonstrating when employees were trained. No risk assessment. It has the no fire and safety risk assessment. It has the issue number 32N. The next top frequent issues in our list is no fire and safety risk assessment. The factory should conduct periodic fire and safety risk assessment at workplace to identify risk being involved in the production process and to communicate the identified issues or risks with the management through address. The risk assessment should include the following, but not limited to. The first one being identification of safety and fire hazard. The next one, identification of people at risk. Third one, evacuation and plan to remove or reduce risk. Then after, record of findings, preparation of an emergency plan and necessary training. And last but not the least, timeline to review and update the risk assessment regularly. And it is also recommended to conduct risk assessment either by an internal team. The internal team should be a competent person or competent safety officer or OSHA certified team member. Or you can also approach external credible organization and follow with them with the action plan for the implementation. As a best practice is to review the procedure on risk assessment and risk assessment records at least once in a year. So the factory should conduct the periodical fire and safety risk assessment and ensure to take remedial action on the identified issues. The next issue, the chemical containers are not properly labeled and MSDS forms are not available in areas where chemicals are used or stored, and it has the issue ID number EV1A. EV means like environmental 1A. This is, as I said, another next top frequent issue which is related to chemical management. The factory required to communicate the risk of hazardous chemical and subsequent control mechanism to mitigate the risk to the employees. The material safety data sheet, that is MSDS, of the hazardous chemicals is required to maintain in the factory. The MSDS should be written in the native language and it should readily accessible to the workers in the area where the hazardous chemical are used or stored. For some cases, the factory has various kinds of chemicals with MSDS. For such instances, factory only display all chemicals MSDS. In such cases, it's recommended that the factory management post key information for employees if requires, as well as to maintain the full version of the MSDS in a full file on the site. The full version of the MSDS should have access to all employees at the factory. All hazardous chemical containers and chemical process tanks in the workplace must contain labels stating the name of the hazardous chemical of the container and the warning sign of health and safety or environmental if there are any on the containers. The chemical containers, including the small containers, sometimes like less than 100 ml or grams, are also required to be labeled at least with the name of the chemical and key information of the hazardous. We'll go on to the next issue. The application or renewal of the environmental permits and license are in progress. It has the issue ID environmental 8E, that is EV8E. This is again one of the next top frequent issues which is related to environmental permits and license. As you are all aware that environmental permits and license can be related to water use, energy use, and pollutant emission and discharge. The factory must have the required and valid environmental permits and other required approval for its current operations. If factory could not provide valid environmental permits and license, example, any of EIA approval, environmental acceptance report, and waste discharge permit as applicable by the local law requirement. So in such cases, factory needs to provide at least the assessor with a solid evidence to prove that they're working on it to avoid any critical issue call out on the report. Some of the following solid evidence, but this may not be limited. The application acknowledgement or public notice from the local environmental bureau or authority. This is one of the example of the solid evidence if you do not have a permit or license. And also the second being the contract agreement with the third party as required by law. The third, the payment receipt of the permit, which permit application or equipment upgrade which you already made to the government, or the as required by the local law to the any agency. And the last but not the least, picture of installation of pollutant control equipment. So these are some of the solid evidence that we are listed. So probably you can go back and review your requirement and obtain the application, solid evidence if the permit or license has been expired. Moving on to the next. The factory rules conflict with legal requirements and it has the issue ID 1C. This is again the one of the next top frequent issue, factory rules that is conflicting with the legal requirements. As per target SOVE, factory rules should provide employees with information about administrative and disciplinary practices in the workplace, and that must be in consistency with the local law. So during the assessment and audit, it's found that factory rules were conflicting with local law requirements, and would like to share some of those examples, like Financial penalties for disciplinary breaches that conflict with local law. Example, smoking, unpunctuality, damaged goods, use of drinking water or bathroom facility, etc. The second, under the wages and benefits, wage deduction conflict with local law. Some rules are not legally recognized by appropriate local authority. The factory working hours requirement that conflict with local law. Example, overtime hour requirement conflict with the local law requirement. And the last but not the least, leave requirement that is conflict with the local law requirements. So therefore, we expect all factory and business partners and vendors to review factory rules to ensure that you are meeting all applicable standards and local law requirements. Moving on to the next issue, working hours and wages. We can see 3 issues are listed on the screen. The issue ID 9L and 9M, the first and the third one, are related to working hours, and the middle one, the 22E, which is related to benefits. These are again another top frequent issues in our list. The target requires that factory meet the working hours and wages as per the local law requirement and target SOV standards. The working hours, the overtime and regular working hours should not be crossed 60 hours per week. And target to extend working workers' wages and benefits as required by local law. Some of the typical example of benefits like employer provided or employer paid housing facility, insurance such as like health, dental, life, etc., and retirement benefits, meals and meals allowances, transportation to and from work. So target, expectation and requirement is factory to meet local law requirement in providing the benefits as required by law to the workers. So this is all about working hours and wages. And next we'll move on to the next issues. Factory doesn't have a documented worker grievance record and or feedback process that protects worker confidentiality. It has the number, issue ID number 28D. The factory should provide a clearly defined process for addressing the employee grievances and our feedback system in all languages spoken by all employees. The process should include 1 or more channels for employees to report their concern. Example, anonymous suggestion box, report to management and compliant hotlines and workers committee, etc. The best practice is to document all grievance received, remediation taken, and the communication which you have made with the employees on the grievance mechanism system at the factory. The next issue, factory doesn't have at least 1 employee per shift trained in the first aid in the factory at all times, and it has the issue ID number 40D. The factory should ensure a minimum of 1 person per shift is trained in the first aid so that there is always at least 1 person available in the factory who is able to assist with minor emergency. The first aid training should receive from a competent person or agency or institute. You have to ensure that factory has at least 1 backup person per shift is trained with the first aid in case of absence. Training will be reviewed annually, otherwise as per the local law requirement, unless the expiration date is mentioned on the certificate or document which you have for the first aid trained. The next top frequent issues, the factory doesn't store hazardous liquid, chemicals in proper secondary containment. This has the issue ID EV1C, means environmental 1C. Factory has to ensure that hazardous liquid chemicals are stored in a proper secondary containment. The other next top frequent issue is the functional IO station is not available for employees and it has the issue ID 10N. The facility containing the hazardous material or chemical storage must have a permanent IO station as a precautionary measure. This is a requirement as well. IO solution in the first aid kit is useful, but that cannot be replaced with a permanent IO station. This is very critical to know. IO station in the first aid kit is useful, but that cannot be replaced with a permanent IO station. The IO station must be portable. The portable, water usage should be very clean and clear and drinkable water with appropriate temperature and pressure to clean the hive without causing further harm. So these are the top frequent issues that we identified so